a little bit of a different setup out here today, but once again, the lighting in my office is like just blaring sunlight. So that doesn't really work. It looks actually a little dark out here. I know I should just get like box lights. I'm not gonna do that. Anyways, today I have my top 10 books of 2024. Honestly, 2024 is probably the worst reading year I have had in years, probably in the last like 4 years. Not that I didn't read some great books. I absolutely love each of these books I'm about to talk about, but I read the least amount. I think I only read 87, which still, that's crazy to be like, I only read 87 books, because I know that that's still a lot, but this is also the first year in the past like 5 years that I've read less than 100 books. You know, I used to read like 200 books, but you know what, 2024 was a good year for me. I published 3 books. I wrote and published 3 books, so that obviously took up a lot of my time. And one of my goals for 2024 was to have more of a work-life balance, because I obviously still have a full-time job. I write and then I do YouTube, and I really, the past like couple of years, had just kept my head down. I stayed home, I worked, I like didn't really do anything for myself. And then this year I just really made a concerted effort to not just spend all my time like in my little comfort zone working, and instead actually like living and enjoying my life more. And obviously then that detracted from my reading and writing progress at times, but you know what, like I had a really good 2024 personally, and that's okay that then I didn't read as many books, because you know what, I still found 10 books that I absolutely loved, and I can't wait to talk about them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. I honestly didn't even do honorable mentions. Maybe I will. Honestly, do I even have any? I don't know. So you know what, we might just do my top 10, and these are in order. So my 10th favorite book that I read this year was Hidden Scars by Andy Jackson. Now this is an hockey college forced proximity roommates romance. This one follows Jeremy and Preston. So Preston is like the golden boy of hockey. He is a very, very talented hockey player. And when it is announced that he's going to be coming to this university, the players, the coaches, the university is kind of like, oh my gosh, like why did he pick our program? Like he's definitely better than our program is, but like we're really excited to have him here. Except when he shows up, he very much comes in and is like, you guys are not doing enough work, you're not like dedicated hard enough, you're not working hard enough, you know, whatever, you better get it in shape, because even if you might not be going places like I am, and I'm not going to let you drag me down. And Jeremy, our other hero, is immediately put off by this, because he plays hockey, he loves it, but he definitely just plays it for fun and just because he enjoys it. He has friends on the team, and he's kind of like, you're taking this all a little bit too seriously. And these two end up being roommates. And Preston just always kind of rubs Jeremy the wrong way, and Jeremy obviously rubs Preston the wrong way, because they're just kind of opposites. But then, you know, as things go and as Preston's layers get peeled back one by one, Jeremy realizes that there's so much more to this like golden boy than he ever would have thought. Definitely check your triggers on this book. It's a lot darker than I was anticipating, just more so like personally with Preston's character, but I loved it. I loved the burn of their relationship. I loved how Jeremy was there for Preston, like through and through. He was like a ride or die, and once he like decided that Preston was like his person, there was like no length that he wouldn't go to try to protect him, and I loved it. It was so good. Y'all know I love hockey romances, and yeah, it definitely earned its spot on my top 10. Next up, then we have a darker romance, and that is The Fabric of Our Souls by K.M. Morinova. This does have a different cover now, because it's been traditionally published. This is the indie version of it, so the cover will look a little bit different if you go and buy it now. But I absolutely devoured this book. It came in at the perfect point too. I was like in a big reading slump, and this kind of like helped pull me out of it for a little bit. I was in and out of a reading slump all year long, but for a while this book had pulled me out. And it follows Win and Liam, and basically Liam craves life and Win craves death. So at the beginning of this book, you start out with Win, who wakes up in a hospital bed after a failed suicide attempt, and she just immediately is like, great, this was not my plan to be waking up. And her brother, who is basically her only family, sitting there at her bedside and is like, you cannot leave me. Like, I know that you want to, but like, you are my only family. You are the only person that I have. You cannot leave. You need to like fight for this. You need to fight. If you're not going to fight for yourself, fight for me. And she decides like, okay, you know, whatever. I don't really know what else to do at this point. So when he wants to send her off to this, I'd say very like untraditional mental health facility, she's like, you know what, I don't really have anything else going. Sure, I'll go ahead and go. So when she arrives there, she ends up meeting Liam, who she's already like, hey, I've met you before. You were my nurse for a hot second over at the hospital. And he's like, oh yeah, you know, like I'm not a nurse. I just sneak out of here sometimes. And when I saw you, I wanted to like see you, I guess, or like come into your room, and she's kind of like, red flags, and they end up being roommates. Like I said, very untraditional, and you start also peeling back Liam's layers of why he's at this mental health institution as well. And like I said, it's very untraditional, but it makes for a really cool setting. And there also is this bit of like mystery, like murder mystery almost type plot in this. Like the health facility itself is almost like a bit of a character, and with some of its like past secrets that get unraveled throughout the course of this book. I think it's classified as like a romantic thriller. I personally wouldn't say that it gives like necessarily thriller vibes. I'd say it more just kind of felt to me like a dark romance with like a bit of like a mystery subplot to it. But I obviously enjoyed that aspect. But the thing about this book that earned its spot on my list was genuinely the mental health. I loved the healing that these two were able to give each other. Their journeys are not easy. It's not quick. It's not overnight. These two truly have to fight for themselves and fight for each other. I loved it. The writing was beautiful. And yeah, like I said, it earned its spot. Next up, I can't really talk about the plot of this book literally at all, but that's okay, because you know what, then it can be a little bit of a quicker one, and that is Crescent City 3, House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. So this one is the third book in the Crescent City series. When I saw that this came out this year, I was like, this was this year? Like when I was looking back at my reading journal, because this feels so long ago when this book came out. But obviously, I am a huge Throne of Glass, y'all know. Favorite series of all time. I love ACOTAR. I really love the Crescent City series too. However, I will say this book in particular, I was most excited for some of the, things that I can't really even say, but if you've read it, then you know what I was really like invested in, looking forward to. And just the reading experience of this book was so good, because I was reading it alongside like so many of my friends who also were like so excited for this book. We were like on FaceTime reading together, and like the reactions to certain parts that happened and like things that were like hinted at or confirmed. I loved it. I loved the reading experience of this book. Now I will say, this is not my favorite book. Actually, I think Sky and Breath is still my least favorite of the series. The first one is still my favorite. Honestly, Bryce kind of pissed me off in this book, quite frankly. But I still loved this book overall. I loved Rune and Lydia a lot in this book. There are so many things that I loved about this book, but I will say it is not my favorite Sarah J. Maas book. But again, comparatively to everything else that I read, it still is on my top 10 list. If I would have read this last year, probably wouldn't have made it. But I loved the reading experience of it, and I'm really, really excited to see where this is headed, where everything's headed. Next up, we have a dark academia romance. We have NOC Deadia by Carrie Lake. So this one is a dark academia student-teacher. Why could I not think of that all of a sudden? Student-teacher romance. This one follows Deverick and Lilia. So Lilia, she sees her mother pass away right in front of her eyes, and no one really believes her when she says that when she saw her dying, that these like worms almost like things crawled out of her body and crawled down the drain. So she's like, she did not just die how everyone just kind of like says that. I think, was it like accidental drowning or something? She's like, that was not the case. Like, my mother died of some illness. She was not okay leading up to her death, and no one really believes her. And she has aspirations to become a doctor, and she wants to like see if she can find out whatever happened to her mother, but she's not in the financial means to be able to do so whatsoever. That is until she gets a letter from Deadia University, this very prestigious university on this little small island, that basically says like, hey, if you want to drop everything right now, you can come and be on a full ride scholarship. And it's an opportunity that she really wants, but she does have responsibilities at home that she kind of has to get squared away. She does not have a great home life, or like she's taking care of her younger sibling now. She's like in her early 20s and working like a dead-end job. So she's not happy, but she also has these things that she has to get squared away before she's able to go to Deadia. And when she arrives there, she immediately obviously does not really feel like she fits in, because she's not of the same kind of like status as a lot of these families. But one thing that she does know is while she's there, she's going to find answers out about her mother, and some of them lie within Deverick, who is a professor there, and he is very much like a moody professor. No one, like, everyone kind of gives him like a wide berth. However, he is like a genius, so people kind of let him get away with it. And he is doing this research that then when Lilia finds out about, she realizes that like maybe he might be on the same track as she is in terms of like what she's thinking happened to her mother, and he realizes that like maybe she does kind of have pieces to the puzzle that he's looking for, and that he ends up reluctantly accepting her on as like kind of a bit of a TA in his research. And they are attracted to one another, but obviously they fight it. And there is so much more to this book, but like, you just gotta jump into it. Like, I could sit here and probably try to explain the intricacies of this book for like a solid 10 minutes, but genuinely, you just gotta jump in. It's so good. I will say, out of all of the romances on this list, this one is the one that I'd say the story is progressed by the plot way more than it is progressed by the romance, which I, for once, did not for once. I love plot, okay? I'm not trying to say that I don't love plot, but honestly, so many of the books, they are truly driven by the romance. They're driven by those characters, where this book, it is driven by the plot. It's driven by uncovering these answers, this island, this university, like so many of these places. It's so atmospheric. There's so much history. There's so much to uncover. And that genuinely drives the majority of the book. And then it's kind of Lilia and Deverick connecting, and their romance is kind of just like secondary to it. I did not mind that because I love the slow burn. I love the angst. I love the yearning between the two of them that we get because it is a thick book. Now, I will say maybe that would be some people's complaint, is that the romance maybe like does take a bit of a sidestep to the plot. I did not mind that. I loved this book. It's so long, but it made me like fly through it because I couldn't wait to get back into it every single time. I loved both of these characters like separately. I loved them together. This was just overall such a knockout for me. I absolutely loved this book, and I really want to read more by Carrie Lake. Next up at number 6 is the very first book that I read in 2024 last year, and it ended up making it on this list here, and I thought it would even when I read it, and that is The Good Girl by Nikki Sloan. This is the 5th book in the Nashville Neighborhood series, and still my favorite of the series by far. I cannot wait for The Broker, though. That comes out pretty soon. I think it comes out this month, actually, in January. But anyways, this one follows Sydney and Preston, and it is a brother's best friend, bit of a bad boy, good girl, kind of like teach me how to be bad kind of romance. So Sydney, she lives under her parents' thumb, and she has always done what she's told. She's always been the good girl. But once her parents snatch away this promise that they kind of gave her, she's like, you know what, screw this. Like, I am a full-blown adult. Like, I do not have to listen to what you are going to say. So she's kind of like ready to piss him off a little bit. And one of the ways that she can do that is with Preston, who is her older brother's best friend. And Preston has very much a bad reputation. The first book, The Doctor, in this series, it is a boyfriend's dad's romance, and Preston is then the boyfriend that gets left behind for his dad. And in that book, you're like, Preston sucks. Cassidy, get after Dr. Lowe. Like, he's so much better. He's clearly the better option. Like, Preston, you do not like him in that first book. However, now at this point, he really wants to make amends in some of his relationships, and he doesn't like the way that he's been living. He doesn't like the way that he's been kind of letting himself rot in these feelings for years. He's like ready to kind of make some changes, and he's starting a business, and he's just ready to, like, you know, move on, be a better guy. And when his best friend warns him away off of Sydney, he's like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna listen. Like, you've been one of the only people that have been there for me through it all. Like, I'm gonna listen to you. However, after he and Sydney have an interaction at this one party, and he just realizes that, like, oh, he's into Sydney and Sydney is into him, that promise gets harder and harder to keep, especially then when Sydney is like, hey, Preston, I want you to help me learn how to be bad. And he's like, okay, well, if I don't help you out with this, someone else will. So, like, basically, you're trusting me. I know I'm a good person to trust, so maybe I should help you out, but I don't want to betray my friend. It's great. I don't know. This book just worked for me. It just did. I don't really have anything else to say, like, about, I just loved it. I loved it front to back. I don't have a single complaint about this book. It was great. We are now to our top 5. And one that was, the first book in the series was an honorable mention of last year, but this one made it onto the top 10, is The Dixon Rule by Elle Kennedy. This is the second book in the Campus Diary series. So it kind of plays in the same world as the Briar U and the Off-Campus series. However, none of the like second generation characters are main characters in this one. But this one follows Diana and Shane. So Diana's aunt, when she passed away, she left her this like apartment complex that she lives at. And this apartment complex truly is like a character in and of itself. Let me just tell you, it's so fun. She is living there, and one day when she runs out into the hallway, she sees that Shane is moving in across the hall from her. And she's like, oh, absolutely not. I do not want you living here. She has sworn off hockey players, but in particular Shane, because Shane has slept with like the entire cheerleading squad that she's on except for her. And she's like, I've seen what you do. I've seen what you're like, and I don't want that anywhere near me. Like, I don't like you. But he's like, hey, I'm moving in here. You don't really have a choice in that matter. I'm here to stay. And it's just kind of the two of them just messing with each other back and forth. But it is like forced proximity, hate to love, but then they do start fake dating. They both have their reasons for needing kind of like a bit of a fake boyfriend slash girlfriend to put on a show. And then obviously, you know, as it goes, like the fake feelings turn into real feelings. But I don't really want to give away, I guess, why they have to start fake dating. I'll let you read that and find out. I will say definitely check your triggers on this book, even though it looks light and fluffy and happy. And there are a lot of those moments in it. Is very like comedic at times and fun. This book does deal with some really serious topics, so definitely look at your triggers up before going into it. But I absolutely love this. I loved the relationship between them, the banter. Like if there's one thing that Elle Kennedy does, I think one of the best is just banter between characters, and these two, their chemistry was like apparent from the very first chapter. So good together. They're so fun to read them interacting. And like I said, I loved the apartment complex and that kind of like character in and of itself. There's just, I truly loved everything about this book. And obviously there's hockey in it, so I love that too. Okay, we got number 4 on this list, Shattered Obsession by Tina Spencer. This book, I feel like came out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden it was like, I love this book. It's a dark brother's best friend hockey romance, sort of fake dating too, but that more so comes in towards the end of the book. But this one follows Zoe and Dominic. And Zoe, after some unfortunate circumstances at work, they end up transferring her to the New York City office. And it's not really something that she wants to do, but it's kind of something that she's forced into doing. And so she ends up calling up her older brother, Aaron, who is really the only family that she keeps in any sort of contact with. She has a really bad relationship with her parents. However, she's always still had a good one with her older brother. So she ends up calling him, and he's this like millionaire real estate agent in New York who lives in this like high-rise fancy building. He's like, of course, come and stay with me. So she does, but when she arrives, she realizes that his best friend and the guy who has always hated her, Dominic, is also living in that building as well. So she's gonna be running into him all of the time now there. And Dominic hates Zoe for reasons that you find out. He has this bit of a grudge against her. And he is also the star player of the New York Slashers, the like professional hockey team out in New York City. However, even though he is like their number one player, he is a bit of a media mess. And he has gotten into quite a few troubles for being this like playboy kind of figure. And the team is starting to be like, hey, we get it. You're like our best player, but we can't keep pushing your shit under the rug. Like you got to clean up your image a little bit. And one of the ways that he decides to do that is by getting a fake girlfriend, and that ends up being Zoe. And so the two of them then are kind of forced into these circumstances together. I loved the absolute shit out of this book. I love the progression of their relationship. I love the angst. Dominic, he's just like a dick, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved his relationship with Zoe. And then once you find out like what all of his anger that he takes out towards her is rooted inside of himself, he's so obsessed with her, and I can't get over it. I love them. I still need to read book 2 in the duet. Genuinely, some of this stuff is rent-free stuff from this book in my head. I absolutely love it. If you love hockey romances and if you love darker romances, you need to read this. We are down to my top 3 books of this year. So at number 3, we have King of Pride by Anna Huang. This is the second book in the Kings of Sin series. This one follows Kai and Isabella, and it is so far my favorite book out of the Kings of Sin. I haven't read the 4th one yet, but I love this. I think Twisted Hate is still my favorite Anna Huang book, but genuinely this is up there in like my top books of hers of all time. So this one follows Kai and Isabella. Obviously it's a billionaire romance, and it's a bit of like a workplace-ish type romance. So Kai, he is the heir to this huge like company that his family has run and kept in his family for generations. However, his mother, who is the current CEO, is getting ready to step down pretty suddenly. And he's kind of like, okay, I got to get it together. I'm going to be taking it over. And she's like, yeah, you thought? No, you're going to have to earn this. Like, I'm going to make you earn this. We're going to do an interview process, and I'm not just handing this company to you. I'm not just handing this company to you because you're my child. Like, obviously, yes, I want this company to stay in the family, but like, you're going to have to earn this just like anyone else. And so he's kind of thrown by that, but then he's like, okay, if I have to like get this together, if I have to make these deals happen, if I have to do these presentations, like I'm going to do what I have to in order to keep this company in my family's legacy. And at the same time, Isabella, she is a worker at the Valhalla Club, which is this like billionaire club, this very exclusive club that Kai is a member at and where they meet. And she is a server there, or like a bartender there. And she does not really know what she wants to do with her life. She kind of feels like a bit of a disappointment to her family. Like all of her siblings are like successful in their own rights, and she just kind of feels like a bit of the odd one out. However, what she does love to do is writing, and she wants to be a writer. And she really, in this book, takes that on and is like, I'm gonna make this happen, but she's just full of self-doubt throughout the process. And when her and Kai meet at the club, they do have a bit of a connection. However, it is very off limits for employees to date any of the members of the club. So she doesn't want to obviously jeopardize her job at all. Kai doesn't want her to jeopardize her job. But as their kind of like friendship grows, they can't really hide it anymore. I'll leave it at that. The thing that I will say about this book is that genuinely, I just feel like I watched two real people fall in love in this book. It's healthy. They communicate. They care about each other. They do sweet gestures for each other. Nothing is like over the top. Nothing is over dramatized. Nothing is overdone. It's just a beautiful romance. I loved it. I know this seems to be like people's least favorite in the Kings of Sin series. I think for the reasons that I just said, just because it is kind of like beautiful in its simplicity in a way, but it's not boring. Like I was never once bored reading this book. I just loved these two characters. I loved how they naturally connected. I loved the burn of their relationship and it felt organic. I have not a single complaint about this book. I absolutely love it. Kai is one of my favorite heroes of Anna Huang's. When he buys Isabella that typewriter, shut the fuck up. It was great. I absolutely loved it. We are down to our top two, which I think you guys probably already know what number one is going to be. But number two is one that I have talked about a bunch this year. I read it back at the beginning of the year. Honestly, a lot of these were books that I read back at the beginning of the year. Surprise, surprise. Once again, has a new cover, but that is Head in the Game by Rebecca Wraith. This is my number two book that I read this year. This is an coach athlete, age gap, romance, coach athlete, sports romance, football. A football romance made it on my top 10. Not another hockey one. I know, I'm just as surprised as you are. But this one follows Bryant and Jack, right? Yes, Jack. So Bryant, he is a retired NFL player, and he recently gets hired by this, I think it's a Texas university, because it's like, you know, one of those like universities that is like really like all in about their football, and he gets hired as their head coach with one job in mind, and that is to make sure that he brings home a championship title for this university. So when he gets hired, he knows that's exactly what he's got to do, and there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So he ends up recruiting Jack, who is a college football player at another university, who is a really, really talented player. However, he did get kicked out of his last university because he ended up sleeping with the coach's niece, I think it was, and like, you know, spread that around. So he was kicked out. He's got a bit of a reputation. However, he is an extremely talented player. So Bryant is like, I think I need him on my team. And when he arrives, he just whips Jack into shape. And he's like, you think you're gonna pull that same sort of shit here? Like, you got another thing coming. However, when he arrives, he's also attracted to Jack, and Jack is also attracted to him. And neither of them really know what to make out of that, especially because there are all of these reasons why they cannot be together, and yet they want to. And let me tell you this, the yearning and the slow burn and the forbiddenness of this book works. I feel like there are so many forbidden romances now where the characters just don't care. They don't care about the consequences, and they just get together super fast. And like all of that build up, all of that forbiddenness that make me love these books is like just poof, gone within like 30%. That is not the case with this one. These two genuinely fight it because they know what's at stake. Bryant needs this job, and Jack has potential to go into the NFL. So neither of them can afford this kind of scandal that would break if the two of them were found out to be together. So they genuinely fight it. And oh, it is just so good. The age gap is great. I truly love everything about this book. It was so good. And once again, just like a surprise. I hadn't heard anyone talk about this book when I read it. I had no preconceived notions. I had never read anything by Rebecca Wraith. I want to read so many more of these books in this series. I was just completely blown away by it. Genuinely, like a favorite forbidden romance of all time for me. I loved it so much. please, 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 if you love forbidden romances, please go and read it. It's so good. And the football, like, so it's a sports romance. So I will say there's definitely a good amount of sports content in here, especially with them being coach athlete. But for someone like me who like football, I don't. I mean, granted, over the course of this year, I've definitely learned more about football, and like I kind of enjoy I more enjoy like the bonding aspect, I guess, of watching football now. Like I don't care about the sport in particular, but it's like I actually enjoyed that in this book for once, which also really surprised me. So, I just absolutely loved it. I loved it. Please read it. Last, but certainly not least, which I didn't even grab all of them off, but my top book of the year / top books of the year is going to come as no surprise to any of you if you have watched any of my videos at any point over the course of this year, or I guess I should probably say past like April on, and that is the Legacy of God series by Rena Kent / my number one book of the year was God of Wrath. This is book 3 in that series. This is genuinely a favorite book of all time for me. Like if someone asks me like off the top of my head top 5 favorite books, this is going to be mentioned in that list because I loved the hell out of this book. I loved it enough that I have the indie man version, the indie discreet version, and then this just recently came out. It's the Bloom traditionally published version with the sprayed edges, and I think, doesn't this have artwork in it? That I, of course, had to buy this one as well. And you know what? God of Ruin, the 4th one, comes out soon from Bloom with the sprayed edges, I think at the end of this month. I'll be buying that one as well. I need every version of this series to exist. I loved Legacy of Gods, and that is truly what sent me into a reading slump for the majority of this year. Like I was just constantly chasing the high that I felt reading these books. I loved each and every one of them. Even my least favorite, God of Ruin, I still loved. I still think I gave that book 5 stars. Like I still enjoyed it. It just by far was my least favorite out of them all. I'll do a ranking at the end here, but specifically as I do with my top 10 lists, I do not include multiple books in a series. I will pick my favorite one, like I did when I read the entirety of the Addicted / Calorie Sisters series. Like I picked Kiss the Sky out of that one, even though like Hot House Flower, Addicted for Now, Thrive, like I loved all of those as well and could have all been on my top 10. But to make it fair to the other books, I just choose one. So Jeremy and Cecily are my one. I love this book with my entire heart and soul, and I need to reread it. I need to reread it, honestly, like right now. But this is a second generation series in the Rena universe, and this one follows Jeremy and Cecily, and they both come from wealthy, powerful families. And this entire series is kind of set up with these two universities, like rivaling universities, where all of these rich, powerful, either mafia or like old money families send their children to. And so Jeremy, he is the heir to the Russian mafia, and he runs shit, kind of. So he is a part of, oh my God, what is it called? Why can't I think of what their little secret society is called with all the masks? He has a mask. What is that? Why am I completely blanking on that? Anyways, he's like the leader of like the secret society at his university, and then Cecily is at this other one, and she is kind of sent in as a bit of a spy on their initiation night to do some sort of like recon. However, when she is there, she is caught by Jeremy, and he immediately is kind of like, what are you doing here? Clocks her, whatever, and she piques his interest. And he even tells her, like, you don't want to catch my attention. Like, you're not gonna like what happens if you do. And Cecily's kind of like, what if I do? What if I do want that? They also have a mutual connection because Cecily is best friends with Jeremy's little sister as well, and there's some history and stuff between that interaction. But anyways, after she is caught and after he knows who she is, he basically starts stalking her. And you know what? I don't even want to accidentally give anything else away in terms of the plot, in case if I like don't realize that you don't know that going in, because I tend to be really bad about doing that. And especially with books that I love, I tend to like overshare. So I'm just going to keep it at that. I very rarely read books where I don't want them to end. Normally I'm like, I'm good with them ending. Like I want to see how this all comes together. This was one where I genuinely never wanted it to end. I genuinely just wanted to read this book forever and ever. I loved it. I felt that way about the entire Legacy of God series. I was so sad when God of War, I mean, obviously I was really anticipating God of War, but I was really sad when that came out and the entire series was done. I obviously know Kiss the Villain is a spinoff coming, whatever, but like Legacy of Gods itself is complete. And my overall ranking of them, obviously, you know, we'll go bottom to top. God of Ruin is my least favorite. I would put that in at number 6. God of Malice is number 5 for me. I love it. I love Killian, but Glendon just like didn't necessarily do it for me. We have a bit of a 3-way tie for second, I guess, because God of War, God of Pain, and God of Fury, I truly love all of those books, and it kind of like bounces around, which is my like favorite out of those, I'd maybe say today's vibes, God of Fury at number 4, God of Pain at number 3, God of War at number 2, and God of Wrath at number 1. Like I said, those 3 change all the time depending on my mood, but I love this entire series, and it was a very, very easy favorite of the year for me. Like, this was genuinely no competition. As soon as I read this book, I knew there wasn't going to be another that I was going to read this year that I would love more than it. That is it for my top 10 of 2024. Yeah, like I said, I don't think I'm gonna do honorable mentions because I honestly can't even think of any honorable mentions really off the bat, except for maybe Breath Mints and Battle Scars by Onyx and Elm, a Hermione fan fiction, but otherwise, I don't know. It was pretty easy to narrow it down this year. So anyways, hopefully not as slumpy of a year in 2025. So anyways, that is it for today's video. I don't know if it's going to be December wrap up or January TBR next. We'll see, one of the two. My videos are kind of off once again, but I had a lot of time off over the holidays and I just enjoyed myself. So, you know, that's okay. It's okay to take breaks. But anyways, we're back on it this year and we're going to be on top of things. So anyways, that is it for today's video and I will see you when I see ya.